Hopefully it changes to the better. I think it's pretty conservative budget on the revenue side. And that's what I want to go over is maybe it's too conservative. One of the things that I heard talking to you guys about is perhaps it makes sense to decide how much of our fund reserves we should put back into this budget. Right now it's about 16, 17%. And so, yeah, we could spend more money, keep an eye on the revenues. If the revenues come in better, then, we're more encouraged to even spend more money. If they come in worse, then as I say, it's a real conservative budget. There's not much on the expenditure side other than essential services. And anyway, that kind of sets us up for this conversation. I don't want to make it too boring by going into a whole bunch of numbers. So please jump in with questions. We can get into a general conversation. At our next meeting in a couple of weeks, we're going to start talking about individual department budgets. So this one is more big picture. And then we'll go through the different funds, the debt service, debt levy, the stormwater, or excuse me, the sewer and water funds, and then also the capital funds. So with that being said, we're estimating that we're going to spend about $700,000 out of our reserves. As I mentioned, that's about 16% of our reserves. That puts us down to about $4 million. So actually $3,977,000 June 30th of 2021. So a little over a year time. We think that if the numbers come in right, we'll be down to about $4 million in reserves. Just to give you an idea how much of a decrease in revenue I'm projecting, the current budget when we started off this year was $11.5 million, a little over $11.5 million in revenues, where this budget has $8.85 million in revenues. So with that kind of a decrease, there's got to be some cuts on the expenditure side. And we'll go through those in a minute. The decrease in sales tax is estimated at 27.3%. I've seen some other estimates from cities doing budgets right now, and that seems to be in line with what other cities are doing. Now, I came up with that decrease in sales tax based on a model that I want to cover with you guys. And again, I think it's pretty conservative, especially I saw Von Maur was open today. I didn't think they'd be open between now and,
really?
and
I
December.
didn't either.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah. TJ Maxx was open. So, if things go well, hey, this budget forecast is too conservative. But we don't know how the virus is going to, foretell what's going to happen over the next year. The general fund and transportation sales tax revenue, I've got it at $1.4 million less than currently budgeted. So as I mentioned, we got a cut. So some of the areas that are proposed to be cut is no pay increase for the employees. No capital equipment requests are going to be funded, at least proposed for funding, which means no police cars, no public works trucks. We do have in here a lease with a truck that we bought last year. It'd be the second year of that lease, so we need to pay for that, pay that off in this budget. It's like $70,000. Then we get into some of the agencies that we help, or other like the Missouri Municipal League or the EDC. There's no money proposed to be a member of those organizations. Training budget was cut. In most cases, no money for training. Now, on the dues side, we've got a line item for dues, and that had money budgeted so people can pay for their professional organizations, but we still need to have money for training so that people can get their continuing education units. There is a 2% medical increase that came to about $22,000, that 2%. There was a request for new positions in the police department. Those weren't proposed to be funded. And then each year we transfer money from the general fund to the street account in the capital fund. Tried to transfer $700,000 this year, but because of the state of the budget, 400,000 of that was moved back to the general fund at the last or a couple meetings ago. In this budget, there's no money proposed to be transferred to street capital list to pay for the projects on that list. Adam, can you go to the next slide, please? I thought it'd be important to take a look at how we stack up with our neighboring cities with the fund balance, because we're proposing to spend some of it. Wentzville and O'Fallon are in really good shape with a percent of their fund balance reserves to their general fund reserves. I think Wentzville, that's 67%, and O'Fallon 61%. St. Peter's maintains two different accounts. One of them is almost $10 million, and the other is a contingency account where they just leave $4.5 million in it at all times. So when you look at finding those two accounts, they're around 34%, I think. It comes to about 34%. And then even in St. Charles, they're like 32%, I believe that number is, where our fund balance is 42%. I see a note from John's computer went down and he is trying to get back in. Thank you, Jason. So we're okay. We're not as good as Wentzville and O'Fallon and our fund balance reserves, but we're okay. I think they're adequate. This next slide is a slide you see every year. It shows where we are when we came into this fiscal year, the balance June 30th of 2019. It shows where we think we're going to be come June 30th of 2020. That's at $4,628,000 in the general fund column. And where we think we're going to be if these revenues and expenditures are accurate, which is around $4 million in the general fund column. But you also see debt service. We're going to have more revenue in debt service than we have in our expenditures. So we're going to have to defease some of the bonds again this year. We'll have actually about $500,000 more revenue than what we can keep. Remember, state law says we can only keep a year of reserve, and then whatever we have as to make our payments. So we're going to have to defease some of those bonds again, and I think they'll be paid off then in 21.
Wow.
Water insurance and sewer insurance. Can you go back, Adam, to that last slide? Thank you. Water and sewer insurance. You know, we're in pretty good shape. I've got some numbers to show you in a minute. The water is $8 a year and the sewer is $28 a year for our residents. And then the capital line or capital column here, we're estimating that we'll have about $2.5 million a year from now. Most of that is all park, but you'll see there's over almost $250,000 in undesignated. So we get interest from money in that fund, and that just goes into an undesignated account, and that can be spent however we want to, to spend it. So if we have a project, like if we do move forward with the Meadows Park at some point, that $250,000 could be used on that project. Next slide, please. So when you try to figure out what's going on in our economy, it isn't easy by any stretch, but we've got to put something together that we can track and see if our forecast is correct, or if it's, you know, too conservative or not conservative enough. And so for this model that I propose, we took a look at the time period from June to December, and then from January to June. And the thinking is that we have a little bit better idea of what's going to happen between now and December. But once we go out further than that, it's going to be really difficult to forecast. And so I took all of the store data that we have for each store, put them into categories like grocery stores, and then came up with a model that says we're either going to get 100% or we're going to get something less than 100%. And we're going to get it from December to, or June to December, and then January to June. So with grocery stores, gas stations, drugstores, Walmart, and Lowe's, I think we're going to get 100% of what we typically get for the entire year. And that's how the sales tax is calculated. But for auto service centers like Firestone and Plaza and, you know, Dobbs, those guys, I was thinking that less people would be going in to get their auto service because, you know, the economy's not that strong and people may not be able to afford that. So I've forecast 80% sales for 12 months. For fast food restaurants, 50% July to December, but then beginning next year, I thought it would go up to about 2/3 of what they normally see. Sit-down restaurants, I didn't think very many of them would be open up between now and December. Could be dead wrong. But I've put in a number of 16%. That's basically about 1 month of revenue, a little bit more than 1 month of revenue. And then January through June, bump that up to 66%. We got some furniture stores in town. I had that at 50% for the first 6 months, and then upped it a little bit the second half of the year. We're really, I anticipate, going to get hammered on auto sales. And again, this could be too conservative, but I've got that at 30% for the first 6 months, and then 50% for the second 6 months. One of the problems with auto sales is the collections go through DMV, and today was the first day that DMV was open in the last month. And so we'll have a lag on collecting taxes because you know, people weren't paying it to DMV because they couldn't pay it. Now we do get some money from other retailers that I don't track. They're real small operators, or they're like NISC. So, you know, they have some retail sales there. Anyway, I've estimated another $182,000 for the entire year coming from those other payers. Any questions on that? You guys think that makes sense or doesn't make sense? And
I agree with it.
I do too.
Makes good sense to me, Paul.
okay, so it sounds like okay, so we'll run with it again. I know these aren't going to be good numbers, but at least it's a placeholder for us to look at, and I can track these stores by these categories, and we'll tweak them over time, see how things go. By the way, sales tax makes about 45% of our general fund revenue, so that's where the meat is, yeah, of our revenue. Adam, can you go to the next slide, please? There are some other non-sales tax revenue items I want to cover as well. The merchant and liquor license fee is 50% of the current budget. Donna and I talked about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, but the thinking is that we have a lot of really small contractors, and that makes up, you say, about 50% of the revenue for liquor or for merchant licenses. Okay, I think you're on mute, Donna.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so we're all okay with that number. This next one, the Missouri gas and vehicle rebate, this, I think I'm real conservative here at 30%. That's over $600,000 a year in revenue to the city. But again, if car sales are down to about 30%, and people are driving less, maybe there's less gasoline being pumped. I think we're going to see a big decrease in that line item. And again, that comes from a rebate from the state of Missouri. Park programming. So, we'll talk to Darren about this, but I don't have any money budgeted for revenue out of our recreation programs like the triathlon, or youth baseball, or the adult leagues, or even the trips that people go on. And the thinking is we'll program revenue if we have enough interest and it makes sense to run the program. If it doesn't have enough people enrolled in whatever rec program we're talking about, to make it so that it produces a profit, then we aren't going to run it because we don't want to operate at a loss. And so we'll adjust the budget if we do have enough interest and we think it makes sense to run those programs. We'll come to you guys and say, yeah, we're going to run 2 months of youth baseball. We think it makes sense. We'll program X for revenue and X for expense, and just do a budget adjustment. Now, one real interesting area of the economy that's not slowing down is our building. And I saw the report out for the month of April. We had 25 new housing starts.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Wow.
We had 20 in March. And, I would have thought by now that we'd see some slowing, but we're still talking to people. And one good example of this not slowing down, Brudervich is over here grading right now. They're moving forward with that project. So
Right, I know this.
Yeah, they're going to invest a whole bunch of money. And I guess their thinking is here in a couple of years, the housing market will be back where it was. And, and maybe it's less expensive to put in the infrastructure right now with gas prices being low and, other costs being low.
Well, over in Mill Creek, McBride has three foundations already started.
I saw that. Now, they are a sales machine. They know how to market. They know how to market a house.
Who's that, McBride?
Yeah,
McBride.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
as much as we love them.
From everything I've seen, real estate's still going strong. I haven't worked, but I know a lot of people have been working. I see new houses going on the market every day. So I'm not surprised about new home sales.
So, when it comes to the revenues for building, Lewis put together, I thought, a really good forecast, but just to be conservative, I cut it some. And what I've got it to is 70%. We'd use 70% of the past 5-year average. It's still a healthy number when you look at how much revenue that is at 70%. So that's good. I mean, that's great to see that part of the economy holding its own. And then the last item on this page is the court fee. I have no idea what to put in here. Absolutely none. I mean, I get it, to pull somebody over and say, do you know how fast you are going? And then put yourself at risk, or whoever you pulled over at risk for getting COVID, that on top of what all's happened over the last few years, with, Michael Brown and everything that happened, we just see a reduction in the number of tickets that are written for substantial sums of money. Now, the tickets themselves went up last year. And I talked to the prosecutor today. He's looking into what went up. Are we writing a lot of tickets for seatbelt violations, which are $10? Are we writing more of those versus writing tickets for DWIs? So he's taking a look at that, and we'll be able to do a better analysis of what's going on there.
People aren't driving better.
No,
Karen.
We're still out writing tickets and pulling people over and such. There's not as much traffic, obviously, as there used to be. There are some excessive speeds though when you get on the highways. So when we see those extreme violations, we're still writing tickets. So there will still be some coming in. They're not holding court, and I think, Paul, that over the years they've reduced the maximum fines that some of these tickets, as opposed to what we used to fine them. So
Will
Yeah.
court be starting up again here pretty soon with this reopening, Paul?
No, I saw an order. I think it's postponed through the month of May. Do you recall, Donna?
Yes, my understanding is right now, the next court date will be in June.
Okay.
that
And
makes
I guess,
sense.
Chief, if you're doing any arrest, it's probably for more violent crimes, I guess.
yeah, we're limiting arrests. Even the jail and the state courts are in a kind of skeleton crew. So yeah, as far as arresting people and that, we're trying to just do, as minimal as possible. Just the extreme cases.
Adam, can you go to the next slide, please? So this sheet gives you a little idea of some of the individual revenues and compared to the current year, where it really stayed about the same or where it's come down quite a bit. Real estate tax actually went up a little bit, or we think it's going to go up a little bit, about $35,000. But then look at the sales tax.
Right.
And then utilities, we don't see an impact on our utility fees because of this. Matter of fact, it might go up a little bit because people are staying home more and watching TV and running the lights more. On the commercial side, it could impact some of the stores being closed if they close again. Maybe we don't get as, from Quiver River for some of the stores. But that's impossible to forecast. The road and bridge rebate, that comes from the county. That's comes from a property tax from the old road board, not road board. Geez, I was getting mixed up. But anyway, it's county money. Merchant licenses, again, Donna and I talked about cutting that in half. You see that there. And I've mentioned the Missouri Gas and Vehicle, how it was over $600,000. And if we cut that to 30%, that's $181,500. There's a really good chance that's going to be higher than that. That ultimately will be higher. We can monitor it it comes in. Renee, you on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
How often do we get that? Is that quarterly, the Missouri gas and vehicle?
No, we get it monthly, but it's behind on 2 of the months, I think. So we
Okay.
get the month before for one, and then the other 2 items we get 2 previous months before.
Okay. So one disbursement will be, one number, and then the other disbursement's larger. If I hear you right,
Yeah,
is it 2 months? Okay. Okay, and then,
Vehicle sales tax comes in, Paul?
I'm sorry?
Is that where vehicle sales tax come in? Under
Yeah.
gas and vehicle? All right.
Yeah, it comes in there, and then it also comes in sales tax.
Okay.
So, Missouri collects sales tax on vehicles and then rebates to the cities a portion of that sales tax. So that's why
Hey,
auto sales is really important to us, because we'll have, in that $3.7 million for sales tax, we'll get a lot of that from vehicle sales that comes directly to us. And then in the Missouri gas and vehicle line, that vehicle sales tax is money that goes to the state of Missouri that they share back with us, a small percent based on population. Youth baseball, right now, we don't have anything in there. And that was an $80,000 revenue source for us.
Paul,
Yeah,
on these sports, I did see where St. Charles said they were starting up their leagues near the end of May. Has there been any talk with any other cities on what we're thinking we may do, or?
hey, Darren, are you online?
You're muted, Darren.
How's that?
There we go.
All right, yeah, we're watching, there's 2 tournament organizations right now. One is trying to get games played the week of Mother's Day weekend. And then there's another tournament that's trying to get their games going the last weekend in May. For New Horizons, which is the league that we participate in with us and Wentzville and Darden Prairie, we've got a June 1st date that we're shooting for. Whether we're able to make it work or not, we should know in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
But I know one of the tournaments that the one that's going for Mother's Day, they've implemented a lot of social distancing rules. So the kids aren't going to be in the dugouts. They're going to be spread out down the baselines. The spectators will be in the outfield, past the fence, but all in the outfield. They won't be on the bleachers. They're implementing some rules where the coaches can't come out and talk to the umpires, which I'm sure everybody will appreciate. But also like no leadoffs on first base. So they're trying to do things to implement social distancing. So I think a lot of these other organizations are going to see how that plays out and see if that works.
Okay. Thanks.
The building permits I mentioned earlier, we're still expecting a fairly solid revenue line there, 314,000. And also with the grading fees.
I think that's gonna be low, Paul.
It could. It very well could be. And I think what we want to do is, at least I'd recommend we leave them there for now, and then we take a look
Right.
October 1st and see where we are. Court fines, again, got that at 50 grand, and that's just a number.
Right.
Any questions on this sheet?
No.
Okay. Hey, John.
Hey, how's it going?
You get my message, John?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you get my message?
No,
Okay. We were just checking to see if you're gonna be on the call.
I got things also screwed up. My laptop, this is screwed up, that my tablet's screwed up. I got everything screwed up.
Not like me last week.
Yeah,
Hey, Paul,
that's what I get for experimenting.
John, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What'd you say?
I said, that's what I get for experimenting.
Oh, okay. Well, you live on the edge, John.
Yeah, man.
Adam, can you go to the next sheet?
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Hey, do you have a list of things that I think we'll probably see an upside to some of these line items that you have. And I didn't know if you had a list of things that you wanted to incorporate if for example, we do have a stronger year than we have forecasted.
I do. And I emailed it out to you a little bit earlier today. It's not a whole lot. It's only $35,000, but in a couple of weeks, we're going to go through individual department budgets. And that would be a good time to really dig into what can we add back into their budgets.
And I read that 35,000, and I don't know how the board feels, but I feel like we have enough on the reserves to take care of that now, but I don't know how others feel about that.
What was on that list, John, or Paul? I'm trying to pull it up on my phone right now.
Well, like the MML, both
Yeah.
MMLs, the EDC, trying to think what else was in there. Those are the ones that caught my eye.
Yeah, I see that now.
Training, I would hate to cut out training too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Training,
I'm
that
with
was one I really wanted, the training, yep.
Jason, are you okay if we go through that a little bit later in this, in this meeting?
Yep,
Sure.
keep going.
Because it'll come up a little bit later when we talk about things that are not in the budget, and I think we ought to add back in.
Okay.
Okay. So on the expense side, kind of like the revenue side, I want to show you how we compare to our current budget. Now, when you look at that administration line, you go, what happened there? But in that budget number of almost 1.5 million, remember that that's the beginning of the year. And that's when we had salaries programmed. This year, since we are not proposing any increase in pay, that really lowers that administration line to $1,074,000. And then what happens is we disperse that money out to the departments after it's approved. So that always inflates that administration line at the beginning of the year. And then once the transfers are made, that admin line comes down. But that's an eye catcher right there. IT, one of the big changes here is we bought some software last year. That was pretty expensive, and we aren't proposing any new software purchases this year. Finance, there's not much change. Community development, one of the big expenses there was the consultant for the code rewrite. And that was how much was that? Lewis, how much, I guess you're on, aren't you, Lewis?
Yeah, that was 125,000, but I think we budgeted that over 2 fiscal years.
Yeah.
I have a question about that. If with this social distancing, weren't we supposed to have at least one or maybe two more, what do I want to say, open houses or something on the code? And if we don't have those, we still owe them all, that doesn't change that fee? If we can't have those due to social distancing?
So, yeah, so public outreach is something we'll still need to figure out how we want to handle. And a lot of that will depend on the timing. So right now I'm wrapping up the last chapter of the draft. So we could be looking at public engagement as early as June, probably June or July. So we just don't know if that'll have to be virtual or in person, or if we postpone that until we can get them in person.
Okay.
But in terms of our contract, it was a fee. That fee included all of their services for completion of the project. So if they don't do certain, so I guess I'm saying if they didn't attend the outreach meetings, that wouldn't affect the overall fee. The fee was to conclude the project.
Okay, thanks, Louis.
In the police department, the big reduction is we don't have capital expenditure in the proposed budget. We had 3 new cop cars in the last year or the current year's budget. Well, that was $105,000, $110,000. Prosecutor, I did talk to Tony today. He's willing to take a reduction in fee. So that's not in this number. So we have to include that. That'll lower that number a little bit. Courts, came down slightly. Public Works, I mean, we got to spend some time on Public Works as we get into their budget. There's a lot of things that we always do, which are not in here. Maybe we ought to think about doing them anyway, such as street sweeping. That's like a $15,000 a year cost. We don't have that in there. We backed off on buying salt for our snow moving operation. Backed off painting the streets. That's we have some money in to paint streets, but we don't have as much as we normally budget. And that's something that, is a life safety issue. So should we be spending more on that and take that out of reserves? Park and recreation. The reason this proposed budget is so low is on the rec side, if we aren't adding any revenue, then we're also not adding any expense. And so that's why that $744,000 is a major decrease from the current budget. Now, if we do come back and we run rec programs, because we have enough revenue to run the programs, then we'll see that expense side go up. And then property management had some decrease. I had mentioned earlier, there's no money proposed to be transferred to the capital fund. We'll see how the year goes. Maybe if these revenue forecasts are way too conservative, we can move some money into the streets.
Hey,
And
Paul,
also yeah, John.
I got a question that it's either been overlooked or something, but the Green Committee, and this is small potatoes compared to what you're talking about, but the Green Committee has $2,000 in the budget. And it's in limbo. I mean, there's nothing happening. I would suggest that we send that back into the general fund.
I think it is, John. I think we did line that out.
Lined it out
We'll
already?
double check that, but I'm pretty sure that got lined out.
Okay.
But if it isn't, well, we will.
Yeah, if it isn't, go ahead, because that everything makes a little difference, a couple thousand, a couple thousand later, so.
What about the City Image Advisory Committee? Do we have any money in there that we could transfer back?
I think that got taken out as well. George, do you remember?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
Yeah, because we also took out the monument sign too, didn't we? We're not doing that.
That's correct. That's in capital though.
Okay. But that's what, $40,000?
Yeah, I think it was 50.
Yeah, I thought 50 maybe even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, can you go to the next slide? I think you went.
No,
I
that's
think
Is that the next one, or did you go to?
that's the next one.
That is the next one, John.
Okay.
Oh,
So we see this slide each year too. It kind of gives us a little perspective on where we are with our salary increase. Again, nothing proposed here. You can see the dollars that we spend each year on salary increase. And we've been trying to do 3% each year. The thinking is that the 3% allows both the grades to move typically around 1.5%, and then people to move further into their pay grade each year. And unfortunately, we don't have any money budgeted for that this year. I don't know if we'll have enough to do anything. The board may say, hey, things are looking pretty good and we're comfortable putting some money in and, maybe at mid-year. We'll just have to see. But there's nothing budgeted for a pay increase this year. Can you go to the next slide, Adam? Here's the way we look at this when we figure out what to have for pay increase. We can get back to Condry's study. He recommended the Labor Bureau's index for wages and salary of state and local employees. So we took a look to see what it is, and the index has risen 2.6% year over year, which the latest month is December. They do it in quarters. We still don't have the March numbers. So 2.6, which means that our pay grade adjustment would have been 1.3%. And if we had budgeted a 3% for pay increase, that difference, what's that, 1.7% would have gone to move people further into their pay grades based on merit. So I wanted you guys to know that's the number that we would have been talking about. Of course, we use the most current one, and we'll, if we do anything down the road, we take a look at whatever's the best data that we have at that time. But the most current data is December, and it's 2.6%. And again, that means 1.3% pay grade movement, and then 1.7% for people moving into the grade. Adam, next slide, please. Talk about health insurance. St. Louis Area Insurance Trust has just been a real good deal for the city. Over the last 4 years now, we've had a total increase of 4% over 4 years. Our rate this year will be 2%. That comes to $22,000. There were 2 years where we did not have a rate increase at all. And that was because our experience was one of the 3 best in the pool. And typically they say, okay, if you're in the top 3, you don't have a rate increase. When we looked at the list this year, we might have been like 7th or 8th. And, which is still pretty good out of 20 some pool members. Hey, Adam, can you go back to that slide? Adam, if you can't go back to that slide, I got to pull it up on my.
Cost of living, you mean?
No, the health insurance.
Yeah, I've got it.
Oh, you got it?
Wants it on
Okay.
ours. I've got it on my tablet.
I don't have it on my tablet now.
Yeah, I don't have it on.
So if you guys have it, that's fine. I can pull it up on my computer here.
I don't have it.
Hey, Adam, can you hear me?
It's the same as what came on the agenda.
Yeah, it's in your packet. So,
Well, I'm ready. I've got it.
okay. I was reading it off the screen, the Zoom screen. So anyway, our premium is currently at $1,155,000. It'll go up to $1,178,000. Again, that's a 2% increase. And real soon, I don't think it's this year, but I bet it's next year, because it's a pool. We'll start getting a check back to us for when they settle up all the claims. whatever balance is left for that year, they disperse back to the pool members who were members at that time of that, at that year. I think it's for year 2013. You know, I don't think we joined till 14, but well, I'll get with George and see if we expect anything, but I think it's going to be next year we can start getting money back. And we're going to talk about dental insurance after we're done with this budget conversation, because we had some savings on the dental side that will offset this 2% increase on the health side. Okay, so the next slide is about new personnel proposed. So we had a couple requests come out of the police department, but I didn't propose that we fund any of them. In the police department, there were requests for dispatch and requests for records clerk. And the chief put together an option 1 and an option 2 for each. For option 1 in the dispatch, it was to have one part-time employee make it full-time, and that cost was $47,000. And then there was another full-time dispatcher requested, and that cost was going to be $68,000. The option 2 was to have 2 part-time dispatchers at $44,000. Chief, you want to go through your reason why you proposed this?
Yeah, and note that this was proposed prior to COVID and prior to everything kind of breaking down. But you know, we had been too short in dispatch. What we want to do is we want to have 2 dispatchers on at all times, and that would bring us up to that minimum manpower. We just, for safety reasons, that's what we've been trying to shoot for over the past couple years. Of course, like I said, this was before any of the COVID crisis hit and the financial setbacks. But as far as the records clerks go, we're trying to go paperless. We're trying to reduce the burden that's on our patrol division. We ran a manpower study this year, and one of the things that we look at is the obligated time, unobligated time. In other words, out of an hour, how often or how long is a police officer tied up on calls? And once you get over 30 minutes that they're reactive, then that's the threshold that says that this study says that you need more manpower. We're trying to reduce that. We're trying to go paperless. We're trying to reduce the number of reports that we take. And one of the options was to put more data entry or records personnel on, which is actually cheaper than hiring police officers, and to try to reduce that burden so they have more proactive time than reactive time. So that was the thought process on the records clerk. But as I said, this was before everything.
I have a question in regards to that, Paul.
Sure.
And Chris.
Mm-hmm.
If we get to the point, say October, like we talked about, where the revenue picture looks better, I guess my question to the chief is, if you could get one of those 2 positions, if we could afford it, which one would you prefer?
Well, actually, what we're looking at right now is we have a part-time dispatcher. That was the one we're going to try to make full-time. But we're going to realign some existing money in the budget. We also have what we call emergency part-time dispatchers that we try to call in. They're harder to schedule and such. We're going to try to up the part-time hours of our dispatcher that we currently have to see if that'll cover more shifts. So if, as far as personnel goes, it would probably be better if we could get some data entry person in to start relieving patrol. That's really our goal.
I'm just hopeful we'll get to the point where we can make that decision. So that's why I wanted your your input on that, if we can do one of those two.
Yeah, we're trying to work out some other options with dispatch to try to bridge some gaps
Okay.
in the existing budget. So we're going to see how that goes over the next year or so.
Thank you.
And it seems like you've been asking for that dispatcher for how many years now?
Yeah, it's been 2 or 3 years, but we're and like I said, it's a safety factor for us. We're trying to get up to 2 people in there, 24/7. But personnel is expensive. It's just expensive.
Mhm.
Well, adding
Okay.
more hours to a part-time is a lot cheaper than getting another employee.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Adam, can you go to the next slide? So this is where we start talking about what did not get into the expenditures at all. There are many line items where the expenses that were requested, and sometimes they were the same as what was funded this current year. Well, they got cut. Well, particular line items we aren't talking about here. These are line items that there's no money allocated at all for that particular line item, where in the past there was money budgeted. And so we can go through this, but Jason, you had mentioned you saw this list of about $35,000 that I think we really ought to do and put back in. Their training, they're for each department, and training is not where you would go to, to pay for your, like Renee to get her CPA. That comes under dues, but she does need to go out like to lunches or to be with people, and in some of those opportunities, you get a number of hours where you can say, I was there and I took a class. It could be a lunch where somebody's doing a demonstration and that counts, or doing a presentation, not demonstration, but a presentation, and that counts towards continuing education. So I think there's enough money in each individual department for the dues. There's no money for training though. And that's where I think we ought to add some money back.
I agree.
And so total for all departments, that was $2,600. That's cheap. Let's do it. I missed the dues for court. That was $180. And then on this page that you're looking at, we have the EDC, the St. Charles County Municipal League, and the Missouri Municipal League. That totals up to $15,500. I think we want to continue to be a member of those organizations, even in these tough times. Be really nice if, like the Missouri Municipal League said, hey, we're going to give everybody a 10% discount because we know times are tough.
Right.
I don't know if they'll do that.
Just like the automobile insurance companies.
Right.
Yep.
I haven't got mine back
So
yet.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see what they come up with.
You want me to ask that question, Paul?
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you think,
Yeah,
what do you
Karen,
think the
that'd be great.
discount should be?
Call it negotiation. Tell them we don't have anything in the budget for them. See what they can do for us.
Yeah, but wait a minute now. Wait a minute. Well, what are they going to, how are they cutting their place?
Well, that's a good point, Mike.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, we're
how are
making
they
cuts. You
gonna
gotta make
cut?
cuts.
This is a nonprofit organization, I assume. I mean,
It's not like that's a lot of money, Paul. I mean, same thing. They're probably working on a reduced budget too. So, I mean,
But
I can call Richard Sheets and ask him, or not Richard, but Dan Ross.
I agree with Paul in regards to training, though. I know to keep your professional engineering registration, you got to get certain professional development units each year, and I think it's the same for Renee too. So I think that's probably something that needs to go back in the $2,600.
Is that's in this list, isn't it, Paul, that you gave us? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure is.
I think that list is really good. And, Paul, I was thinking about it. I think this is really conservative, the forecast.
Mhm.
And I remember when we had a problem with trying to get everybody caught up with their grades and how much money that was, and getting behind on some of that could be difficult in the future. I think that 1.3% to keep the upgrades, to keep them in the grades is going to be what, around 100 grand? And we're only
Something like
using
that,
16% of reserves. I was thinking we could go to 20%.
Gary had mentioned, can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So Jason, are you proposing that we put the pay raise back in, and then this 35,000?
Yes,
Okay.
I think our reserves are strong enough.
What was the total amount of that 1.3, Paul?
Yeah.
I think he
Like he's frozen. I don't know if that computer locked up or not.
I think we should postpone that till October, because you
I
got a
agree.
lot of residents in our city that may not have jobs to go back to.
Yeah,
And I think when we say, even though Jason, I don't disagree with you why to keep up with it, but you got a situation where people may not even have jobs.
No,
So I would rather us wait till
you know
October
what?
to do that.
I agree with that.
I don't disagree with you, but I look at it a different way, as a lot of
You're cutting out, Jason.
Yeah, you're cutting out. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't hear that, Jason.
Yeah, something's going on. I think Paul's frozen. Oh, yeah, he's moving.
Why don't we wait to find out what other cities are doing?
It's
And then, well, I don't know, we're gonna find out, but it could be October, it could be January 1, whatever, and we'll have a better idea. What happens if our numbers, although as conservative as they are less than that?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd like to wait at least, a couple months or so, if October, September, something like that.
okay. I was just throwing it out there. I just thought.
And I think it's a good thing, Jason, I do think it's a good thing, though, when we have a better, maybe a few months go by and we're like, hey, we are in a better position. And I always agree that employees, helping our employees is a good thing, but.
Okay.
And Paul, please let the employees know that we certainly want to take a look at that.
Yeah.
And if we can add it back, we will.
Okay, yeah.
I kind of,
In my mind, if we're going to do anything, like I'd work on pay before adding new employees.
Right.
To me, that's the most important thing that we have.
I agree with that.
I agree with Gary and Mike. I think we got lots of opportunity to make changes down the road. What we're talking about and what Paul is dealing with right now is estimations. We're not clear what's going to happen in the future. So we got to go with what we can go with, and then go from there. We can always make changes down the road a little later.
And that was even something I asked Paul about. The holiday event. I know Paul said we still may be social distancing. I don't know, but that's something we can look at near the end of the year too. It seems like the employees enjoy that. So I even offered to pay for it out of my salary.
Okay, Adam, can we go to the next one? Information technology. So there's one item on this list that I want to point out to you, and that's the voice print upgrade. Our recorder in the police department is going to have its maintenance scheduled expire at the end of this year, which means that if and it records 911 and police radio, if it were to go down, it's going to be real hard to find repair parts for it. And so to upgrade that's $9,000. I think it's critical to take a look at that. And if at all, we need to get that back into the budget.
I agree with that.
Yep, I agree too. 911's real critical.
Yep.
Especially if you're the one making.
No
the call.
argument for me.
I'm good.
I'm all right.
Okay. Next slide, please, Adam. Finance, again, I think that training, we need to have some money back in. And in my email today, I had $300 going back into that. Next slide, please, Adam. Community development. Again, some money going back into training there. Uniforms. We buy boots for employees, and that's something that is important because they got to have a good pair of boots when they're on work site. Those boots are $150 each, so you'll see on that, out of that $35,000 I proposed, adding back in, you'll see some boots for community development. That 360 map link is an awesome feature. And at some point we need to get it. Basically, Louis, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it's a feature that our current code publisher has where you can integrate your zoning map so that it's interactive and it's ties back in with your code. So you can click on individual parcels and then it can take you directly to the code sections for that zoning district, which tells you all the development standards. Say you're a business owner and you want to open a retail shop, you can click a couple buttons and say retail and it will show you all the properties in the city where that's a permitted use. So it has some really cool features with filtering, but it's all centered around the zoning map and integrating that with the code.
Thanks, Louis. I think that would be a real valuable tool to the development community and to the business community. Next slide, please, Adam. Please. Fortunately, there are training escrows and post money that comes from the court where each ticket, a certain amount of money goes into those escrows. And so we are able to pay for some of the virtual training or the Eastern Academy using those monies, as well as some of the other training. We may want to think about supplementing that with some city money now that we're talking about doing that with the other departments. And so that would add to that $2,600 total for all departments. I told the chief when it comes to weapons, let's see where we are with the budget. I believe, we're in pretty good shape with our weapons. But if we need to buy any, we'll come to you guys and say, we need to take money out of our reserves to do it. The license plate readers, I know this is important, and we'll have a HOA letter read during our business meeting about license plate readers, but it's real expensive. Again, with the warning sirens, what a critical equipment to have. If we find out that we have to replace a board on that warning siren, we're going to do it, and then we're going to come to you and say, we did it, but we had to take money out of our reserves to do it. And then, like I mentioned, the vehicle purchases, and that's not in the budget. No capital is in the budget.
So Chief, how are we on vehicles? I know that you just purchased 2 in this budget, right? In this
3 actually. So we'll get 3 new ones in, and we believe so on the rotation, we would have 2 next year, but since we got 3 new ones in, we're just gonna try to stretch it. We'll see. You know, if we get an older vehicle, we'll rotate it toward the back. You have the sergeants drive it, you know, they'll put less miles on it. So we're just gonna try to stretch it for another year and see how it goes. So we're not too bad on vehicles, especially with that purchase for this year, allowing that purchase to go through for this year. So the license plate readers were something that we looked at, like I said, before all this hit. That's not related to the subdivision license plate reader that they're talking about. And as far as the warning sirens go, we replaced those circuit boards, I think, last year. I think they're in good shape. I think we'll be fine, you know, through this year. That's just kind of an insurance policy that we have just in case those go down. But I think that we'll be okay.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Adam, next slide, please. Prosecutor, that $1,500 is in the event that we have this prosecutor take a case to the circuit court. Let's say it's a code enforcement case. We have to pay him to go to the circuit court. If we do that, we'll come to you and ask for funds to pay for it. Next slide, please. Again, in court, there's some money going back into the training account at $35,000. Next slide. Okay, so again, training, there will be money going back into that, but there's a lot here. You know, if I recall, there's like $300,000 or maybe $400,000 in cuts and from the current budget. Snow supply, focus on that one. Our current budget is $58,000. I'm proposing we spend $40,000. Derek's request was $81,000. You know, we use quite a bit of material, and that $81,000 would be what it takes to fill our bin back up, and then I think have another supply dropped off mid-year. Derek, can you go over that a little bit, please?
Yeah, for the last, I think 4 years, we've used more salt than we've purchased each year. The last 2 years, we used about 1,100 tons of salt each year. We've got currently pretty close to 700, maybe more tons in storage. The 40,000 will probably buy right around 500 tons. So we'll have probably 1,200, maybe 1,300 tons, which is a little bit more than we used the last 2 years. If we have a year just like the last 2 years, we'll be fine. But if we have a hard year, we're going to use more salt than we have. If we're lucky and the same vendor that has had our contract gets that contract next year, we'll be able to just buy more at the same rate. But if it's not that vendor and we don't order more salt ahead of time, we'll be just trying to buy salt on the open market. And the last time we did that, we had to ship it in from Kansas at a little over triple the normal rate. And we almost didn't get it. We almost didn't get anything. We just almost were just gonna have to go through a store without any salt.
Yeah,
So this makes me kind of nervous.
Yeah, that's a concern I have. I mean, that's a safety issue too. So I don't know if there's a balance there that maybe, you know, maybe we fund this a little bit more.
What's the cost of salt?
More than what we've had used in the past 2 years, if you got $40,000 more worth of salt?
I'm sorry. There were a couple of people talked at the same time. If
you got the 40,000 for salt, you said that would give you more salt in reserve now than you used in the past 2 years, right?
That would give us right around 1,200 tons. The last 2 years we used 1,100. I think 5 or 6 years ago we used about 1,500. If we have a really hard year, we'll we won't have enough salt.
Derek, what
That's
is the cost of salt now compared to last year or something like that? Or is it a good low price or?
I don't know. I won't know what salt is gonna cost us until probably August, September.
Okay,
And it's not really it's not a commodity where there's pricing out there that's readily available.
I understand. But you know, if it's in August when you find out, it'd be the time to make that decision.
Yeah, I've guessed that salt will cost us $80 a ton. You know, if it costs us $50 a ton, we don't need to have this conversation. If
I
it
know.
costs us $100 a ton,
We need to
then
have
we're
that.
really in trouble.
Yeah. Well, you can't buy it now anyway, right?
I could, but normally we buy with a co-op,
Yeah.
mostly of St. Charles County cities, and we get a better price by going in with them.
No, I agree. I agree. I totally agree with it. I just, what I'm saying is that since it's going to be August before you can find out the price, why don't we just make that decision later on?
Wait in August till August.
Or July.
We can. It just makes me nervous. And if we end up having less than what we think we should on hand, you know, the guidance is that the guidance from APWA is to have twice your average annual usage. So we should have around 2,000 tons at the start of the year. But we've been dipping into that over the years. If I understand we may not be able to do that, and that's okay. If we are in a tight situation where we start the year with less than or close to an average year's salt on hand, we'll probably want to start out the snow season with a change in our tactics. We might not want to put any salt down on cul-de-sac streets unless we get over 2 inches of snow, do things like that.
Well, I understand, but so I just want to make sure, just because we don't make a decision tonight, this is not going to affect. You don't need to know this decision till August, right? Or July or whatever. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. There are a couple items on this list that I'm recommending that we really should put back in. And that's part of that 35,000. One is a on-call traffic consultant. I've got that, and I think 1,500. Yeah, 1,500. And then tree removal. I mean, it's going to happen. We might as well budget for it. So I'm recommending 1,600 there, and I think that's what our current budget is. The dump truck, the F-350 truck. We don't buy these. We're going to, you know, be putting more miles and wear on our equipment and get behind. But again, you know, it's how much money do we want to take out of reserves?
You can always add them in later if you really need them. Of course, it takes a long time to get one.
Well, and also it's like I asked the chief for Derek's consideration. If you could get, I'm looking at the last 3 items or 4, dump truck, F-350 truck, breaker for Bobcat, message board. Thinking primarily of trucks, which one of those 2 trucks do you need more if you can get it back in?
It's kind of hard to say. When I talk to the guys, these things kind of seem to swap around. It depends on what's had more problems most recently. I think that our dump truck, we were thinking that was going to be the one we were desperate for, but we think we got its problem fixed. So I think I would say the flatbed.
Okay.
Paul, you didn't
Okay.
add back in this street sweeping? Did you say you thought maybe we should add that back in?
Do we really need that? That's, I don't know. That's my
I
question.
did see some complaints recently that we're not sweeping it enough, but I mean, people are going to complain no matter
I don't
what.
agree that street sweeping is that vital.
Yeah. So.
Well, So,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've seen some complaints, but you're always gonna get it anyway, so.
The only thing about street sweeping is it's one of our minimum control measures in our NPDES permit.
oh,
And based on the permit, we're supposed to do it. If we don't do it, I don't think that there would be a consequence any greater than a letter that says you guys were supposed to street sweep. But it is one of our, I think I feel obligated. I should tell you that it is one of our minimum control measures. And if we get audited again, that would be something that they would say you didn't meet your requirements on your permit.
And then we could also say, well, we didn't know we were gonna have COVID virus either.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, we had a pandemic.
I don't think they're gonna fine us. I don't think they're gonna penalize us. I think it would just be a statement in a letter saying you failed to meet your standard.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so the park has 2 pages because so much has been cut from the recreation program and some of the other things. I think, again, we can add this back if we decide to run a program and it makes sense, we can make some money off of it instead of lose money. One of the things I want to point out is the day camp. That's a big deal. Some of the cities are beginning to talk about having day camps, even though that would be abbreviated, because we know there's a demand for them out there. So we may come back and recommend doing that. The Renaud Center contribution, $5,000, it's kind of a big deal. We worked out an agreement with O'Fallon so that our residents can enjoy the same rate that O'Fallon residents pay over there. Well, that's not in here.
And you're probably not able to use the Renaud Center much right now either.
yeah, I would think.
How many people even signed up for that, Paul?
We did look into that, and there were a number of people that were taking advantage of it. How many people were new compared to before we had this benefit? I don't know.
Yeah.
We've been averaging right about.
What's the difference? Did you add up 5,000 divided by however many people we got? Is it the decrease help us or hurt us?
Darren, can you answer that?
Yeah, and we've been steady at about between 90 people and 115 people that have been taking advantage of it. And basically,
that's fine.
If you add it up, that's about the difference that the people would pay individually between the resident and non-resident rates spread out over 100 people.
That's
so it's a break even.
It's a break even for us.
That's quite a few. It's more people than I thought would take advantage of it.
Well, there were more people going there without this program, Gary. How much it increased, I don't know. We weren't able to find that out.
Yeah.
I think we need to add some money back in for the arborist.
I think so too.
In this $35,000, we've got $3,000, Darren. I mean, that gets you a start because we do use the arborist for development questions, and sometimes public calls them up. I know Darren talks to them, so I think we got to add some money back in for that. I mean, the holiday lights, those are out. Now we can wrap the trees here at City Hall. We did that ourselves. And so we can do that. Next page, please.
You can always wait until the end of the year, see where we're at too.
Yep. So it's the triathlon may go, it may not go, but for now we're not anticipating it'll be run this year. Concerts, special events, One of the things that I think we need to add back in is that Veterans Day and Memorial Day, if we want to keep our hair.
Right. I think so too.
Take our scalp. So we got to add that back
Yeah,
in.
that's very important.
Yep.
Okay, next slide, please.
We lose somebody?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay.
My screen freezes sometimes. Property management. There's one item on this list I want to point out to you that I think we ought to do. And that's the metal roof repair over at Public Works. We got a bad leak over there. $6,000. You don't want to have a leaky roof. So I think that's something that we really ought to do.
No, cost more in the long run.
Yeah. You know, this closet, IT closet installation, we're kind of running on, I don't know, borrowed time, maybe the word, where we've got a lot of equipment in there. It gets kind of warm and we need to get air conditioning units going so we don't fry the equipment. But I mean, there's this replace HVAC Civic Center, $40,000.
What's that for?
Yeah.
What is it for?
That's the Andover control system, updating that to a modern system. It's an old PLC based system that is getting hard to find people to program it.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Yeah, we moved in here.
I can donate a couple of window units to you guys.
Yeah, these windows don't open.
Oh, well, forget about that then.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for the general fund, but we have the other funds we want to go through and specifically spend some time on capital. Any questions on the general fund?
No.
Oh, I just got one question. Is this next year a reassessment year?
I thought it was this year.
Yes, it is. It's a reassessment year.
Yeah.
I think it is because Cohen asked me about that at the Meadows. I think it's this year.
Isn't it odd numbered years?
I thought it was odd numbered years.
Yeah, I thought it was last year they did the reassessment.
Yeah.
I think it's this year because, oh, maybe you're right. Because we've been getting, we had some people that protested their reassessment. So you're right.
Right.
Yep, it's odd number. So it'll be next year, 2021.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, and one other question is our, this has to do with sales tax. Is the Von Mar bond thing completely paid off or have the cash?
Garage payment?
Yeah, the garage payment's paid off. We actually got an $11,000 refund.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
By the way, I was at Von Mar today and I was surprised how many vehicles are using the parking garage.
We use it when there's hailstorms. We'll take the car over there.
Those are all walkers. Those are people walking around there in NASC.
All right, so the next page is, can you go to the next one, please? Okay, thank you. The debt service. So I had a typo on this one. I corrected it on my sheet. At the bottom, you'll see excess expense over revenue. That should be excess revenue over expense.
That's what I was thinking, Paul. I saw that and I was thinking, how could he get expense?
Yeah, no, it's just a typo.
Yeah, it's okay.
So
well, how come it's, oh, go on. Never mind.
Yeah, I was going to say we're in great shape here. We're going to have to defease more of those bonds. And I think that puts us on schedule, to pay them off next year.
But I think it's in at 22. The first quarter of 22 is the earliest.
Mike, I thought it was like, maybe it is March of 22, but I thought we had.
I'll look it up.
Maybe it's March of 22.
That's okay.
I'm pretty sure, Mike is right.
That means, Renee, if you could jump in here, I think that means that last year of real estate collection will be a small.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think we lost him again.
It's frozen again. Hello, Matt Ray.
I'll grab something.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's all right. Are you back, Paul?
I'm back. You know, I talk to myself at home all the time too.
Nobody listens to you there.
Nobody listens. Hey, Matt.
We're ignoring you.
Want to go to the next page, please?
Water line.
Okay. Water line. The bottom information gives us some data on where we were from 2016-17 to this current year. So far, our expense year to date is only 15,000. Remember, we raised that charge from $4, I think, to $8 this year. So we should be building up some reserves again, but I recommend we just keep this at $8.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you never know what might happen here in the next couple months.
Right.
Okay. And then next page, please, Adam. Now the sewer line, we might want to look at this. Derek, have you had a chance to analyze where we stand with our reserves here? Should we keep this at $28?
We can't increase it if that was the question. 28's the cap, but I haven't gone.
Reserves.
What's that?
Yeah, if you could take a look at our reserves, you know, how much have we built up over the years?
Okay, yeah, I can look into that. I can look into that.
You can go back and look at your fund balance schedule to see that.
Yeah, let's see. We'll need to see that before we can make a determination of what's in there.
Yeah, let's do that, because if you look at those 4 years, we had 20,000 the first year, maybe 50,000 the second year, 60,000 the third year, and you know, our year to date is only 87,000 out of 162 in revenue.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to make a change, but let's see what the actual is first.
Right.
We're estimating at June of 2021 in sewer, there's going to be $215,000 left over at the $28 rate.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, we got to make a change there.
Yeah, we started that after we started the sewer or the water line. Now we collect more money in that, so we hadn't done anything yet because as a percentage of the amount of revenue we collect, the fund balance wasn't that much higher than the water, but at this point we probably should be looking at lowering that.
What do you think as far as lowering that, Derek?
Well, I'm sorry, I really haven't looked at it very carefully. I could give you that at the next meeting.
That'd be good.
I wouldn't suggest we do anything extreme.
No, I agree with John.
I think maybe a small decrease might be in line.
Yeah, I would.
Reduce it down to 25.
Yeah, I would say we could calculate what charge would get us equal to maybe like our last 3 years average expenses. And that way we can hopefully keep the fund balance equal or maybe a slight decline.
And you never have a crazy year, as far as weather and other issues.
Derek, what's the largest expense that I know you don't know exactly, but the biggest happening, 10 grand, 20 grand?
I think it's capped at 7,500, but then they can come in and ask for additional from the board.
Yeah, I know, but what do you think the real high is? 10 grand at the most, per instance?
No, I mean, there could easily be a $15,000 or $20,000 expense, but we've never seen anything more than $7,000, $8,000, $9,000.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out how much reserve we needed, and if you could have $100,000 event, you need some reserves.
No, I think it would have to be fairly unusual to get to 20.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes to finish this up and talk about capital. So I'd like to move on to the capital budget. But first off, I just got a text from the chief. There was an explosion and fire at All-Purpose Wrecker. Can you believe that?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so he's on his way over there.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, that's on the agenda tonight. Was it the building? Do they have a building over there?
Yeah, they have a building, and he said there was a building explosion.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Okay.
Horrible.
Adam, can you go next page, please? So here's the revenue for the capital. You can see the park and public works revenue is reduced. And if this is accurate, which it might be, then we don't have enough money to do all of the public works, street and stormwater projects. And you will see here in a minute that we removed the North Hinkie Road project from this list because we don't have enough money to do the construction. It was scheduled for this coming fiscal year, $300,000. But with only $871,000 in revenue instead of 1.2 million, we're going to have to make some cuts. We do get some money from the county and the feds and the state on the roundabout. And that is moving full speed ahead. We got to talk about that a little bit tonight. And then we also have some money for phase 3 of Lake St. Louis Boulevard. That's to do some, Derek, it looks like right away.
For the roundabout?
No, for Lake St. Louis Boulevard phase 3.
Yes, sir. Phase 3 would be roundabout this coming year. Or I'm right away this coming year.
Yeah, okay. There's some money that we're getting from federal grant to do an overlay over at the shops at Hawk Ridge. And then we have some interest income and we get some money from the cell tower. All totals up about $3 million. Next page, please, Adam. So here are the stormwater projects. That 2 Picardy construction, 225,000 is by far the largest project that we have. Derek, you want to talk about those real quick?
Yeah, those 3 projects. Brookstone is over on Brookstone Drive. There was a home built on a lot that probably shouldn't have ever been built on. That happened 14, 15 years ago. And when that happened, there was some storm sewer work done, which isn't really working very well. And we've got water leaving the road and causing a nuisance in running water up against some foundations of homes. We think that we can fix that by changing the inlet type, and we can pretty much do that with in-house work, but there's a fair amount of material involved. So we've got some money budgeted for that. I'd like to do that when we do those, when we find those type of problems or have in the past, where we have water that's actually leaving the roadway and then causing a problem on private property. We've considered those to be a high priority, and we try to do them in the next coming budget year. So we'd like to keep that in the budget. To Picardy Construction is the construction for a project that we've been working on for a couple of years now. We've got one more property to acquire an easement from, and when we acquire that easement, I would like to execute that project. I think it'll be a big benefit for the property owners, but it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's critical. It's not something that was dramatically different this year than it was the last couple of years. And our easements will still be good if we postpone that. And Newport Terrace is, it's a continuation of the Lakeview project. That's the design phase of that project. And it's, we've got some water overtopping a roadway, kind of draining through a yard. It's a nuisance kind of scenario. It's not real big public safety issue. I think it could be delayed. It really wouldn't be a big problem.
Wasn't the Picardy one that we had a public open house on?
To Picardy, we had a public open house, and yes, we've had a lot of support from the residents, and the residents have been pretty cooperative with giving us the easements. We have one person that's particularly concerned with how it may affect their property, but I think that they are working towards signing the easement over. They're just wanting their attorney to look at things. So
I'd like to see us do those first two, just to carry through with what we've committed to the residents.
Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So these are the street projects. Derek, can you cover those real quick, please? We're running out of time.
yeah, so Lake St. Louis Boulevard Phase 3 right away is between Newport Terrace and the Spillway Bridge. It's right away acquisition, ADA sidewalks. We cut that by $25,000. That's we're trying to keep some money in towards sidewalks every year to insulate us from claims that we're not doing what we should for ADA. I think that's still plenty good. Roundabout enhancements, we had talked about $275,000 for that based on the cost estimate provided by the landscape architect. That's a opportunity that it's going to be really hard to do that in the future. I'd like to do that while we have the opportunity. We need to talk about that later on during staff comments. Lake St. Louis Boulevard roundabout construction, that's a grant project. So it costs us very little. That's planning on moving forward. Asphalt overlay, we've got that at 0 because remember we tried to cut the asphalt and concrete in half each year. So this current budget year, we're spending all of our budget for those 2 lines on asphalt, and next year we'll spend all of our money on concrete panels, which is the next line. And those just a effort to reduce our expenses. Shops at Hawk Ridge overlay, that's another grant project, and that's a right-of-way acquisition for that project.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. So this is the capital project fund for parks. Darren, would you please talk about these items?
The first one, the Boulevard Park playground equipment, it's to replace the entire playground structure over Boulevard Park. It's to the age right now where when pieces become unsafe or they break, we can't find the replacement pieces for them. So we'd like to replace the entire playground area, and then some of the concrete over there is buckling, and replace all that as well. The second item is the Boulevard Park asphalt trail repairs. That would be basically the entire asphalt path around the pavilion or the amphitheater area. And then no name park development, 150,000, and most of that's going to go for the restroom facility and signage and equipment rental. Those are the three things that I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I think the next slide is our last one. And it's the summary of the 601 fund. So if we do all of this work, Public Works, we're estimating we'll have $22,000 remaining at the end of this coming fiscal year. That's $2.5 million in revenues and expenses of just under $3 million. The park column, we're still think we'll have $2.1 million in fund balance. I think that's important in the event that someday we get back on the Meadows Park. You know, the plan was to use $1 million of that $2 million, take $2 million out of, or take another $1 million out of the general fund. So $1 million would come from capital, $1 million would come from the general fund, and then we would borrow $2 million using the sales tax for park capital. And someday we may be able to get back on that program. It'd be an excellent project. So there's money here to do that. The veterans have some money. And then I had mentioned earlier this undesignated money that comes from interest that we earn.
Did Paul freeze on us again?
All right. I'm sorry about that. I'm back. So I was saying that undesignated column, 292,000 can be spent however you guys want to spend.
Oh.
I believe that's it. Again, we're going to go into more detail with individual department budgets in a couple of weeks. But from what I've heard the board say, when it comes to the revenues, excuse me, let's leave them where they are and see how the year goes and make adjustments as we go along. On the expense side, add the $35,000 back into the budget and then take a look at some of these items that we talked about today and see if we want to add those back in. And again, that means our fund balance would go down, but we're right now around 16, 17% of spending our fund balance. So we have quite a bit left. And that's something we need to decide, how much do we want to spend out of fund balance? I've heard different opinions from you guys, and we can get all on the same page. That'd be really good.
Okay, the 35 grand, the ones in your email, the items in your email that you sent out today.
I'm sorry, Mike, the 35 grand is what?
The items that you sent in email today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Just making sure.
Yep, you've got that. And I think I covered most of it tonight.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So we have a few minutes left maybe to talk about Delta dental bid. George, can you cover that in like 9 minutes?
Yes.
No, we need about
Hopefully faster.
more like 8 minutes.
You do it like 4 minutes?
Yes.
Need a couple minutes to go
Yeah.
to the restroom.
Yeah.
So our 2-year contract or a year contract with Delta Dental is going to expire on June 30th of this year, and our broker USI Insurance went out to bid and got some pretty aggressive bids, specifically from Mutual of Omaha and MetLife. And when those numbers were shared back with Delta Dental, they came back and revised their bid with a decrease of 5%. So that would be savings looking around $4,600 a year if we were to stay with Delta Dental. If we were to make the switch, we're looking at savings of around $16,000. When you compare the carriers, employees like Delta Dental because every dentist is in their network. There really is no such thing as an out-of-network dentist. And really, I haven't gotten any complaints about their service. We did a network utilization report, and it looks like around 28% of employees, dentists, or providers would not be in MetLife's network, and around 33% for Mutual of Omaha. So there would be some disruption for employees if we were to make a switch. So Paul and I talked about this. We weren't quite sure how to recommend proceeding. Now that Delta's come back with a 5% decrease, that is pretty encouraging. But we just wanted to bring this to your attention and see what your thoughts were.
I say stay with Delta. Stay with Delta.
Yeah, that's what I say. I hate making people change, especially when they have something, a dentist they're comfortable with. They may be going through procedures that they have to finish, that this would really disrupt that.
Plus they're not getting paid.
I just have one question with that. And you said 28%, only 28% are not covered, right?
28% of the providers are not within their network.
How many
So,
people?
The report doesn't show that. There's about 90 dentists or providers that employees go to. There's 82 full-time employees who are on the insurance. You know, there's some pediatric dentists or some specialists that you might only see, you know, once every few years. They weren't able to provide a breakdown by number of employees affected.
Well, I'm with everybody else. I think we ought to stay with Delta because it provides the employees and they're happy with that. We're not giving them any money this year in the form of salary. So I think that's a good idea to stay with Delta.
Okay.
I agree, because I've used Delta off and on for the last 30 years, and I think they're the best.
Yeah.
We got
So
switched to MetLife, so we have the same problem here.
The savings for sticking with Delta for 1 year, it's going to be a $4,600 reduction. And I was looking at the employee contributions that they make for Slate, our health insurance. As Paul mentioned earlier, we have a 2% increase. And the way we apply that is the city's contribution increases 2% and the employees does as well. The employees' contribution overall is going to increase around $3,200. So, you know, the savings from sticking with Delta could cover that increase for employees if that was something we'd be interested in doing.
So what's the net hit to the budget on that? If we stick with Delta and the increase of the health insurance?
Sticking with Delta will save us $4,600. I think the Slate increase total is $24,000 and employees make up $3,200 of that.
Okay.
Their contributions.
So what's the math on that?
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Curious.
Yeah, stay with Delta.
Yep.
I'm good.
Okay. So we'll work that out and get a contract on the next agenda. Anything else you guys want to talk about, or actually it's 7 o'clock?
Motion to adjourn for like a minute.
Yeah, and I'm
I've got
going to
5 minutes
need
on my
the
clock.
agenda.
I got 5 minutes.
All right.
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes. Paul or Donna or Adam, I guess probably Adam. I need to have the agenda because I don't have anything that I can, since I'm using my tablet.
Website?
Oh, that's fine. No problem.
Okay.
All right. Did we get a second to adjourn?
30
Yeah,
seconds.
about
No.
5 minutes.
Oh, Brad, I've got it right here now.
Yeah, I think we need somebody to second me though.
Second.
So if you got
Okay.
a pen, it's,
Minutes, guys.
All right.
Right.
We'll be right back.
It's 815